Dro.
Good day. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Good day, everyone. Welcome to the lecture on reptiles. How are you guys for the lab exam next week? This or this? All right. So how positive. We're going to be talking about reptiles today, and we are also going to do an exam overview. We are going to go over the contents and the structure of that exam. I'm talking about my final exam, the one that you're going to have on December the 5th, at the end of this presentation. And the purpose of doing this early is so you can start preparing for that, because there are some contents that we're going to drop, so it's a good idea probably for you to know right away, okay, don't need to study this file out, okay? And along with that, I am also going to give you a little bit of a calendar of the next 2 or 3 lectures that are coming up for you. Okay. All that comes at the end of this. I have just one announcement for those of you who are going to be here in the fall next year. You probably know this, but I teach a course called Marine Biology. It's actually ongoing right now. If you're interested in this kind of subject, feel free to enroll if you like this stuff. Those are 3-4 generations of people like you who have taken the course, and they seem very happy. They're all smiling. I don't know if that's just for the picture, but they seem happy in the water and outside. There's a lot of stuff going on outside. We try to go outside quite a bit. Emma can say that she's taking the course. And this is the kind of thing that we do. We go to places like this in Cavendish to observe piping flowers. Not every year, this changes from year to year. So this year we got the chance of doing this, but this gives you an idea. We go to places like Stratford where we talk with Pat about rocky shores. We sample fish. This is a Stanley Ridge. I don't know if you're familiar with the geography of the island. And we go to sample sandy beaches in places like Basin Head or in the North Shore, in the park, and things like that. So, if you like that kind of stuff, feel free to enroll. Or if you have any questions about this, just send me an email or come to see me and I will tell you more details. Or I can just give you a copy of the current outline so you get an idea what is this about. Okay. That's for September, so it's still far away, but I put it there just in case you're interested in this next year. Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the scary creatures that we call reptiles. We end the lecture last week asking basically, the limitations, these limitations that we observed in the amphibians, which are basically related to the inability to go farther away from the water, this necessity that they have to come back to the water to reproduce, are also the strength of a new group, the group that went one step further in the evolution. This is the group, this is the reptiles. What makes reptiles different from amphibians? They don't have the limitations of the amphibians in terms of that inability to reproduce away from the water. They can do that, and they can do that because they have some particular adaptations that make them very, very well adapted for a life in dry conditions. Not in wet conditions, but in dry conditions. This is basically at the essence of everything, and the next slide will show that this is the first and most important adaptation. The eggs of reptiles have an amnion, or an amniotic cavity. And that makes all the difference, because that amniotic cavity, that liquid inside, is basically the little pond that they will carry with them in order to be able to reproduce. So they are no longer needed to be in the water to reproduce, because they have that little microhabitat inside the egg. That makes reptiles different from amphibians. These are 3 out of the 6 most important innovations, and I'm going to emphasize on the innovations at the end of this presentation when we talk about what is the focus for the final exam. These are 3 of the 6 main innovations of reptiles with respect to amphibians. First, there is an amnion. This amnion here and this amniotic cavity here surrounding the embryo that makes all the difference. This is a protective membrane and a little cavity that basically is going to provide food and shell or shelter for the embryo. So the embryo doesn't actually need to come out in the water as an egg. The egg provides those things now. That's why they can go away from the water for release. The second adaptation that is very important is they have a dry, scaly skin. They develop these scales up to a much better developed level than the amphibians. If you remember the frogs, for example, they have a very thin skin that was very permeable. So frogs need to go for a short period of time to full exposure in the sun, and they are basically going to dry and die. Reptiles can go for a long period of time under the sun, and they won't be affected because of this thick layer of scales that they develop. And you can see in every example, this is skin of a reptile. There's many versions of that. These are typical scales here coming out from the dermis or epidermis, if you want. The third adaptation that is very important, and not many people talk about this, but it's actually quite critical, is in the excretion. They have a highly concentrated urine, which basically means is when they pee, they lose the minimum amount of water. They retain water. They just threw away what is useless, what is no longer usable for the metabolism, as a highly concentrated urine. Instead of peeing liters and liters and liters of water to get rid of all your residuals, you just pee, I don't know, a little bit of water with all the bad stuff, all very highly concentrated. So their excretory system is adapted now for real dry conditions to avoid losing water, basically. These are the other three characteristics, and you can probably guess what the three others are, but these are the three main ones. The next ones are these. They need a copulatory organ. This may not come out as an straight answer, but actually makes sense. If I am going to have eggs, or if I am going to have an embryo developing into an egg, it means that I'm investing a lot in that particular embryo, protecting the embryo, so I need to secure fertilization. I will not secure fertilization by throwing my gametes or my eggs in the water. The water is out of the picture here. So copulation is mandatory. They have to have organs in order to copulate, so the male and the female basically get together and those gametes meet, and basically that egg is produced. Better jaws, and actually much bigger jaws, which give them a much broader range of potential prey, potential food. It's no longer about eating mosquitoes or small invertebrates or some small things. In exceptional cases, now this big game, this crocodile will be able to eat. You probably have seen videos of almost anything, right? You probably have seen these Google videos or YouTube videos or National Geographic videos of crocodile fighting any kind of mouse you can imagine. So they are powerful. They actually have the ability to go for the large prey, but also for the small prey. And then, and this should be the most obvious one, stronger skeletons. If you are going to have a body like a crocodile, you need a skeleton strong and firm enough to support that weight. This is no longer about a frog of this size. Now we are talking about things that are much larger, and if we talk about dinosaurs, for example, we are talking about things that are considerably much larger. So you need the development of strong arms and limbs, the development of basically a skeleton that is able to support. These 6 innovations make sense? They should make sense. They make the difference between these and the amphibians. Okay? So you need to remember these innovations. This is the reptile diversity as we know it today. There are about roughly 8,000 species of reptiles, divided between those which are the most distinctive ones among the ones that we have today, the ones that we know currently. But there is also obviously many fossil species that are not here with us. There are ectotherm species with some exceptions, so for the most part, they tend to be cold blood species, some people call it that way. They tend to basically regulate the temperature of the body in a very minimal way. They basically have a temperature that is according to what the environment is. They don't have the ability to control the temperature like ours at 37 or 38 degrees internally, regardless of whether it's sunny or it's very cold outside. They don't really have that developed yet. That comes with birds and comes with mammals. There are exceptions though, and the more research people do, especially with dinosaurs, they found that they were actually closer and closer to actually have some sort of regulation of temperature. But for the most part, they are still considered ectotherm species. They were the most diverse, and they were actually the most dominant creatures in size, in ecological roles, in you name it, during the Mesozoic, which was the era of the dinosaurs. During that time, reptiles were really the big players. Or not much today. Before, obviously, the extinction or the massive extinction that took place during the Cretaceous, which is the one that took away the dinosaurs. Because they were so prominent on this, I want to go back to the causes, to basically the reasons that we believe caused that extinction. That is the main one that you already know, but we're going to go in other 3 hypotheses that actually explain what happened basically at the end of the Cretaceous, about 65 millions of years ago, when basically all these dominant creatures basically got wiped out from the planet. Because of that, mammals started to proliferate. I'm going to show you a short video of that that I hope brings in not just the idea of an asteroid hit the planet and that's it. It's actually more than that. Okay? So hopefully the sound will be okay with this.
We would have seen a world something like Africa in terms of the number of animals out there. But instead of big mammals, we have big dinosaurs. Herds of triceratops, herds of duck-billed dinosaurs, small to big predators, the largest being T-Rex.
Dinosaurs ruled the prehistoric world for almost 200 million years. Then something took out 2/3 of all living creatures, including the giant beasts. After years of searching for clues, most experts now agree that a single cataclysm doomed the dinosaurs.
The evidence for an impact of a 6-mile-wide asteroid 65 million years ago is about as good as anything gets in science.
65 million years ago, a rock the size of Mount Everest barreled down from the sky and slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula near modern Chicxulub, Mexico. The impact unleashed an unstoppable chain of destruction. First locally, then across the globe.
The KT is an asteroid-driven extinction. A big rock from space came down, clunked a few dinosaurs on the head, but the kill mechanism was really the secondary effects of this. It would have been darkening the atmosphere, acid rain, a change in the entire biosphere.
Proponents of the single impact theory point to a convincing array of evidence, including high levels of the asteroid element iridium at the KT event's geological boundary, or death layer, and of course, the smoking gun itself, the underwater crater in modern Mexico. But is this cold case finally closed? Some scientists now argue the Yucatan asteroid had accomplices.
There seem to be various causes that can trigger these, and in some cases, several causes come together in sort of a confluence of bad circumstances to provide a particularly damaging extinction event.
Millions of years before the KT extinction, vast lava flows have been pouring out of the Deccan Traps, a series of lava beds now located in southwest India. These flood basalts once spewed out enough magma to cover 1 million square miles and belched up a toxic brew of gases that could have altered the climate around the world.
That period of eruption is pretty coincident with the extinction 65 million years ago as well. In fact, they were going on for millions of years before the KT impact and before the extinctions. And so perhaps could be a complicating factor.
In this scenario, the dinosaurs received a double knockout blow. First, the rampant volcanism of the Deccan traps, then the Yucatan impact. And a small group of dissenters goes even further, claiming that multiple asteroids struck Earth at roughly the same time, 65 million years ago. According to them, the Yucatan impact wasn't the largest, only the best documented.
Some people think that there may have been multiple impacts, a shower of impacts, for example. Perhaps they came from a single object that broke apart.
Supporters of this hypothesis point to a suspicious geologic feature, a 370-mile basin off the coast of India, more than 3 times larger than the Yucatan impact site. But controversy swirls around this so-called Shiva crater, named after the Hindu god of destruction, including whether it's even a crater at all.
While this feature certainly looks circular and looks crater-like, there's no other evidence that it's an actual impact structure.
For some, the dinosaur die-off debate rages on. But most scientists agree the apocalyptic event was a very fortunate day for small mammals that were no longer dinner for T-Rex.
Had it not been for the KT impact and the volcanism that was also at the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs, the mammals probably wouldn't have risen to the prominence that they did. And thank heaven for the rise of mammals, because that led to the rise of humans.
I guess that gives you a pretty good idea of some of the main hypotheses behind the extinction of these large animals. Again, we're talking about a massive extinction that took away not just a lot of different species, but also many species that were the dominant species all over the globe. So this was quite a change, and mammals actually capitalized on that. Mammals were able to proliferate and diversify because because the dinosaurs were no longer there playing such an important role. So remember, it's not just about an asteroid hitting the planet, maybe many different asteroids, maybe a rain of those, and may not just be the impact itself, which probably caused a lot of damage, but what came afterwards, because there was so much of a dust coming out into the atmosphere that darkened basically everything and prevent sunlight probably for months, maybe years, from basically shining over plants, and that basically means all the plants are going to die. Every organism that survives or relies on plants is going to die, and then every organism that rely on the herbivores will die. Okay, and that's basically a sequence of effects, plus the cigarettes. It's always a bad thing. Okay. Let me give you an idea of what kind of diversity we're talking about. This is a cladogram. I hope you remember what a cladogram means. We talked about this early in the course, showing some characteristics that link different groups in different ways. This is the characteristic here that's very important for reptiles, eggs with extra embryonic membranes, and this is what makes the difference with amphibians. And as you can see, when these characteristics show up here, you have one group of turtles, you have a second group with lizards, snakes, crocodiles, and one branch that is the birds. Birds are reptiles. We teach them as a separate group simply because there is many people who love birds and they have feathers. But other than the feathers, there is not really much of a difference between birds and reptiles. Okay? Keep that in mind. They belong into the same group, but we keep teaching them as a separate group. Mammals are definitely a separate thing, even when mammals actually come out from a branch of the reptiles as well, as you're going to see. Okay, this is the classification of the reptiles, and we're going to distinguish 3 main groups. I think the distinction is fairly straightforward. The first group is the anapsids, and the main difference between anapsids and the other two groups is that there is no temporal openings in the cranium. This is basically the opening or the eye, where the eye will go. There is no holes or openings in the back, as you're going to see in the other group. Let me show you the second group there. These are the synapsids, and this one has one temporal opening and is basically represented very well in the many reptiles that are currently extinct and also in the reptiles that originated mammals. This is what I mean by the temporal opening here, that cavity that you have behind your eye, okay, in your cranium. That is a temporal opening. In the first case, the anapsids do not have anything, as I hope you can see. In the case of the synapsids, you have one temporal opening, which is quite prominent here, and should be very easy to see. And then you have the third group, which is the main group, the one that includes most of the reptiles that we know, that have two temporal openings, one here and one over here in the cranium. This is the group that includes the dinosaurs that become extinct at the end of the Mesozoic. This is the group that includes all the modern groups of reptiles, named some like the snakes, lizards, crocodiles, and birds. Remember, birds are reptiles, or are a subgroup of the reptiles that happen to have feathers that are much more colorful, much more pretty. That's why they become a different group. Okay, so these are the three groups. We are going to go over which one of them and give you a rough idea of their diversity and their main adaptations and basically features that you would recognize for those that are more familiar to you, and not so much for the ones that are fossil species. Okay, can I go ahead? Yes? No one is saying no? Okay, this is the first group. These are the anapsids and includes basically the turtles and a few other groups that are probably all extinct by now. The turtles are quite distinctive because they have this particular morphology that every one of you will recognize what I mean when I say turtle, or many of you will have a little turtle in an aquarium at home. There's about 300 species of them. Most of them are really aquatic species, not because they need to be aquatic. Remember, we're talking about reptiles, but simply because they choose that habitat is more, they adapted to that habitat basically when they develop as different species. This particular shell, that prominent shell that you see in all the turtles, which is this structure here, this carapace, is the most distinctive feature of turtles, and basically evolved for protection, which should not come as news for you. When the turtle feels threat, basically just hide the head and basically use the shell for protection. They are oviparous species, which basically means they put eggs, and you should be familiar with the idea of turtles coming to the village, putting the eggs in the sand, going away, and then when the conditions are right, little turtles coming out of there, basically going into the water. You probably have seen those scenes in many videos. I hope it's familiar for you. It should be familiar for you. A familiar view. Something that is very important about the shell, since this is the most important feature for this particular group, is this dorsal carapace, talking about the shell, and then the ventral part of this, which is also fused with the ribs and is called plastron. That bottom part of the shell, not the one that you see in the top, but the one that you usually don't see in the bottom, is called the plastron. It's rigid, it's hard, thick. It's not as strong as the one in the top, obviously, but it's quite strong as a structure. The carapace is basically the fusion of vertebra and ribs all together with this large, unique structure that you recognize as the shell of the turtle. This is a primitive form of reptile that basically was one of the ones that originated turtles. You don't need to remember that name, just so you see, you can tell that you saw a fossil of the turtle or something that looks like a turtle, but you don't need to remember that. And you've all have seen these kind of things and videos, and Finding Nemo and the turtles going to Australia and things like that. you're all familiar with the idea what the card would look like. Okay? So, should be fairly familiar. Let's go to the second group. This one is includes all the extinct reptiles and include one particular group that is very, very relevant to us. It's called the Therapsids. And I'm afraid you will need to remember that name because there is no common name for that. Therapsids are going to show up again when we go over the lecture about mammals, because this is the form of reptile that is thought to be kind of the original lineage for mammals. Okay? Mammals come out from a branch of this thing, this very primitive form of reptile, the therapsid or mammal-like reptiles. The difference between a therapsid and any of the other creatures here, that probably is the section there too, is that you see the legs are very, very long and the main part of the body is considerably far away from the ground. Unlike other reptiles that tend to be much closer to the ground. Okay? Don't write those names. I will never ask you about those fossil names, obviously. It's kind of obvious, but just in case you're desperately trying to write every single word, you don't have to worry about that. The name that you need to remember is this, and obviously this, and what that means in terms of number of overlooks. That's the key thing that you need to remember. Let's go to the group number 3, which is probably the most interesting for you because it includes, the cool reptiles, include the dinosaurs, but also include the modern reptiles, which, with the exception of turtles, of course, which are the ones that you should be more familiar with. This particular group radiated during the Mesozoic, especially when we talk about dinosaurs, and then a big chunk of them disappeared. Became extinct during the Cretaceous because of these asteroids, because of cigarettes, because whatever cause was behind this, and basically gave birth to a number of forms. These are 2 primitive forms that are no longer with us, the Ichthyosaurus and the Pteranodon from the late Cretaceous. We know about them simply because of the fossil record. We don't have these creatures anymore here. The ones that we have are the modern groups of reptiles, which are included between the therapsids. These are, so something, you don't need to write these, obviously. I mean, you can write if you want, but I won't ask you about it, obviously. So just way too many names that are not, I guess, easy to remember. All right? For the midterm, if you have questions about the midterm, if I remember, you are about 117 roughly, and I mark all your midterms and quizzes. So that's a lot of midterms and quizzes, so I may have made mistakes, so don't be afraid to come and ask me. I will have no problems to change your mark in case I make mistakes. So if you have any questions, just come to see me. Don't be afraid to ask, because you may have more marks than you think you have. Okay. Plus, I like to see people sometimes. I like to be social and talk to students once in a while. Okay. Lizards. This is the first group, 3A. There is 3 main groups: lizards, snakes, crocodiles, and there is another one. We are going to see them in just a second. Lizards is the first group that I want to show you. This is the most diversified groups out of all of the reptiles we have. We're talking about 2,000 different species. These include the geckos, the iguanas, and the skinks. Don't ask me exactly what the difference between each one of them is. Some of them are very famous because they have the ability to change their colors and match the background. And you probably have seen cartoons or videos or documentaries about it. So you are kind of familiar with the idea of what a lizard looks like. See? Yeah. I'm going to show you, as soon as I see that you're not writing a quick video about one particular type of lizard that I think is going to be interesting for you, because it's probably the biggest lizard that we have. And if you watch James Bond movies, you should have seen one of these during the last James Bond movie. Okay? You guys like James Bond movies? issue. All right. Can I go ahead? Somebody still working on this one? I can come back to this slide after the short video anyways. This will show you the friendly side of the lizards because we tend to associate these kind of organisms with something very scary, right? This is the friendly side of the lizards. These are the biggest one. These are what we call the Komodo dragon. You're going to see how they look like when they're babies.
Something special is happening at the Denver Zoo. After 8 months in an incubator, eggs are hatching. And these rare baby Komodo dragons are getting their first glimpse of the world.
Working with an animal like this that has very rarely been bred in captivity, and so little is known about them that everything that we do is such a learning process that makes it very exciting for us.
Komodo dragons are notoriously difficult to breed in captivity. Hatching these rare reptiles takes time and patience. It's hard to believe, but when fully grown, these tiny baby dragons turn into adult Komodos that weigh more than 150 pounds and can live for over 30 years. There may be fewer than 5,000 of these ancient creatures in the wild, living on small islands in Indonesia.
With small populations like the Komodo dragon, it's important for us to learn as much as we can about not only keeping them alive, but reproducing them and raising the young. And by keeping animals and breeding them, we learn a lot that a lot of times you can't learn from field biology.
While staff check the incubators for new hatchlings, the adult dragons are examined closely by their handlers.
This is Casper the dragon. He's a very curious dragon. He's very friendly, as you can see. He likes to be pet. He'll shut his eyes when I rub him near the head.
The captive Komodos seem gentle, but handlers know better. Adult dragons have a nasty bite.
She's coming.
Wild Komodos will eat just about anything. These zoo dragons feast on a diet consisting of fish and rats. The baby Komodos will live in a nursery for now and move to a much larger exhibit as they grow.
Anytime we raise babies from almost this size to adulthood to the point where they're breeding, it means to us that we're doing a good job.
These baby dragons are a small miracle and proof that some creatures truly are born to be wild.
The biggest Komodo dragon that you saw there are not the biggest one that you can actually see. They are a bit bigger than that, but still, I mean, to see something that is the size of that table could be scary enough for somebody to walk around. And as you can see with those poor rats, that tells you right away why mammals proliferate after all these large reptiles basically disappear. And I'm talking about dinosaurs, which are much bigger than those. Okay. Let's look at the second group of the apsids. These are the crocodiles. Everyone knows what a crocodile looks like. These are the largest living reptiles, even bigger than the Komodo dragons. By the way, if you look in Google or in YouTube, you're going to find Komodo dragons attacking deers or all kind of things. So they can actually go for large prey, not just for small mice or things like that. They are actually very dangerous. And in fact, many people avoid the Komodo Islands for obvious reasons because they live there and they are scary, but now they have become a touristic attraction because many people want to see the dragons of Komodo, and it becomes part of the economy actually of those particular regions. Okay, the second group include the crocodiles, which is the largest living reptile. These are, for the most part, tropical or subtropical species, meaning that they tend to live in fairly warm places. If you see pictures of Florida, or if you see these shows about real estate in Florida, sometimes some of them are selling houses close to the water area, and all of a sudden you see a crocodile just walking out of there in the backyard. So, and there is another show, what's the name? In Discovery Channel, or one of these channels, that about people hunting for this type of organisms. I can't remember the name, for alligators and things like that. But anyways, they tend to live in warmer habitats, so you're not going to find these kind of creatures up here in this whole region in Canada. But essentially, as you can see, one of the main adaptations that they have was these huge mandibles, huge jaws that allow them to actually go after large prey. And again, if you look in internet, as you probably do all the time, it's very easy to find videos of crocodile fighting against whatever, lions, deers, and things like that. This is quite common to see that. Okay, the third group of the apsids is the snakes. Probably among the most spooky ones. When you talk about potential reptiles, not many people like snakes as pets, because not many people like snakes as pets. They are derived from lizard ancestors, or they are close link between those. They are close cousins. Boas and pythons are the most primitive forms, and I think it's a type of python which is the largest one in the world. Again, if you go and look the largest snake in the world, you are going to find something in the Amazonian forest or somewhere in Africa, and you're going to have these huge things, videos about these huge things, basically eating almost anything. One particular thing that is quite remarkable in this group, and they have it and the rest of the reptiles don't necessarily have it, is the presence of glands that produce these venoms. Some of them produce neurotoxins, which are able to stop breathing and the heartbeat, so they can be lethal. Some of them produce hemotoxins, which can cause blood clot that I don't know if that will be lethal, but it's going to cause a lot of trouble anyways. And obviously they produce these in order to catch a prey, obviously. And you probably have seen many movies with the snakes, including the snakes in the airplanes or something like that, which is a terrible movie. Horrible movie. That really shows you how much people are scared about these creatures. So what I'm going to show you now is the friendly side of the snakes. Okay? Is anybody here from Manitoba? Nobody here is from Manitoba? No. There is a place in Manitoba where there is lots of the snakes, and this video shows a little bit of that. And you will see children playing with the snakes as little pets. Weird children, I call them. I can't believe they do that, but they do that. So, let's see the friendly side of the snakes and something about the snake in Canada. Okay.
People come from all over the world just to see the snake dance here. A lot of children are a little more willing to hold the snakes and to interact with them. Sometimes the adults are a little more apprehensive, which I think is kind of odd, that it's almost like the fear of snakes has been built into people as they grow up.
I do not like snakes because they're a little unpredictable, and I'm doing a terrible job pretending that I like snakes.
Here, the Interlake of Manitoba, Canada, is by far the largest aggregations or concentrations of snakes anywhere in the world. The Interlake of Manitoba is so plentiful, or why snakes are so plentiful here, really goes back to the geology of the area. Temperatures can reach 50 degrees below zero. And so a snake, being a cold-blooded animal, they have to be able to survive those winter temperatures. So that here in the Interlake region, the limestone bedrock is very close to the surface. And so that allows the cold and the water to crack and fissure the limestone, and it makes great big sinkholes, and that enables the snakes to get below the frost line during the winter. There's a very limited number of these den sites. So all the snakes in an area have to go to that den site that's in their region. And so that's how you end up with literally tens of thousands of snakes. being in a sinkhole that might be the size of the average person's living room. It is actually very difficult for the males to find a female because if you look from a snake's eye view, you just see kind of a sea of living spaghetti, and you're looking for a slightly bigger piece of spaghetti than all the rest of them. They'll detect the female sex pheromone. The males are very easily able to then go past all the other pieces of spaghetti, if you will, and home in on the female. Oftentimes when the group of these courting males all gather around one female trying to be that lucky guy that's going to mate with her, they'll get so wrapped up they can tumble downhill literally like a ball. So people call them mating balls. Even though there's tremendous competition for mates, the males are not fighting with each other. They don't have dominance hierarchies. They don't have territories set up like other animals would do in a similar situation. I like to call them the ambassadors of the reptile world. They're a great way for people to interact with wildlife.
Look at Mommy smile. The garter snakes don't have teeth, and they feel cool when you touch them and stuff. So they don't bite you. They just kind of move around in your hand really fast and stuff.
Awesome job, guys.
Now, obviously, all the snakes here are harmless. The dens here at Narcissus have been set up through Manitoba Conservation, and the boardwalks have been made, and they're regulated. So it's a nice place for people to come visit with minimal impact on the denning sites themselves.
Way back at the turn of the century, and even through the 20s, 30s, and 40s, people had a pretty bad attitude about snakes and trying to clear them out. Just times have changed a lot. I think people are much more environmentally conscious. Really and truly, having these healthy numbers of snakes means you're living in a healthy environment.
That's the friendly side snakes, and if you watch Indiana Jones, in one of the Indiana Jones movies, he didn't like the snakes, so it's not a bad thing to like the snakes. Okay, I'm going to just show you one slide about birds. This is the introductory slide, and we're going to get back to this when we talk about birds, which again is actually belong into the reptiles class, but is usually addressed as a completely different group, even when it shouldn't be that way. Bird diversity includes about almost 10,000 species in 30 different orders, and we're not going to look into orders. What I want to show you today is this particular fossil. You probably heard about this before. You may have seen it in biology, maybe in high school. This is the Archaeopteryx fossil that was found, I can't remember exactly where now, and basically it's a fossil that shows some sort of transition between reptiles and birds, just to really show how closely related, as close cousins they are. Yeah, this was discovered in 1861, and since then there have been many other sightings of these kind of fossils, and quite a bit of research on this particular type of evidence. This evolved from the apsid reptiles ancestors, and its anatomy includes 3 things that are really typical of reptiles, and then 3 other things that are typical of birds or mother birds. The reptile characteristics are, there is no bird beak that whenever we talk about it, the skull of the beak has some particular arrangement of bones, all fused together, that you don't find in reptiles. And this skull, this cranium for this particular fossil was that way. It was not that way. It was like the typical reptile cranium. Okay. This particular fossil had teeth, which is again typical of reptiles. Birds do not have teeth. And then they have the scaly skin, which is typical of reptiles. It's one of the most distinctive features of reptiles. At the same time, the same fossil has these 3 characteristics which are much closer to what we would call bird characteristics. They have feathers, or some sort of primitive form of feathers, which is, that's what identifies birds. That is the essence of birds. They have a bird-like cranium, and they have a bird-like tail, which is different from basically the posterior part of reptiles. These 6 characteristics show basically how closely related reptiles and birds are, and basically this particular fossil became a celebrity among the fossils because it marks the exact, or apparently marks the exact transition between the two groups. All right. When I see that you're done writing that, we're going to move on. We're going to look into birds next week, and then you're going to get all the details about basically what makes birds different from reptiles, the new innovations. I'm going to skip the next 2 slides. I'm going to go into the overview. Okay. We're going to see that in the bird lecture. So this is the overview. Okay. This slide, as you can probably see, it says 1 of 10, meaning that I'm going to put 10 different slides here are going to be available in multiple, so you don't need to take notes or take pictures for that purpose. Okay? This is going to be removed, what I'm going to show you from now on. Alright? The idea of this is basically give you a good overview about the contents primarily, so you can start working in the particular groups that are going to be in the final exam, and maybe leaving aside those that are not going to be in the final exam and you don't need to prepare for. Okay? We're good to go? Okay. First question. Do you like multiple choice questions? No? I can tell you that on average, because that will change from person to person. You do about the same with short answer questions, so it's entirely after you. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me. Will you still have a few multiple choice? Will you get rid of them? Will you have more? All right, I will ask about it in 2 minutes from now, okay? So you make sure you think about it. All right. Okay, first thing first, final exam. Remember, don't take notes, this is going to be posted. It's in the gym, as you probably know, on Friday, December the 5th, 2 p.m., and you will have 3 hours. You probably will need 1 hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, but you have 3 hours. As usual, we ask you to be there at least 15 minutes earlier. It's a good idea to be there on time. And bring your UPI ID, and that's just a requirement that people usually use in these cases. Not that I'm going to write down your UPI address or anything. No electronic devices of any kind are allowed, and that is again standard, so you should know about it. And when I pass you your exams, I will ask you to read the cover page, because then it will say, okay, this is the number of questions that you should have. Let me know right away in case there was something, a problem with the photocopier machine and you are missing a page, and then you realize at the end of the exam, right? That kind of thing. In case you're thinking about not being there, you need a piece of paper that says why you're not there. And you need to contact the registrar's office. You probably know about this, but I have to say it. You need to contact the registrar's office within 24 hours. I really appreciate that you also send me an email so I know. But they are the ones that have to be contacted, because they are the ones that are going to arrange when you're writing in the final exam. I guess you know about that, but I have to mention. If you need special accommodations, more time, distraction-free environment, or whatever it is, make sure that the student services know, because then they will send me an email saying, okay, these 2, 3, or 5 people need a special arrangement, and they will get a copy of the exam. If you just show up in student services, they won't have a copy of the exam for you, okay? Because they need to be informed before the exam. So make sure that they know that you need some sort of accommodation in case that's the case for you. Questions until the day before the exam at noon, because in the afternoon I will be printing. And then question by email the same at noon, and I will try to post the questions in the afternoon, but let's say 8 o'clock is safe to say those are going to be posted, so you're going to see all the questions that I got and the answers, and you will have access to that information. I didn't get too many in the quiz, and I didn't get too many in the interview. Remember, it's a good thing to do to send questions. because I usually do the exam a few days in advance, and I'm not going to change my questions based on the questions that I got. So you may get the answers that are going to show up in the final exam, just the day before of the final exam, so it will be convenient for you in that way. Okay, these are the newest content that we have seen so far, or we are going to see. You probably remember these are the lophophoridates or the transition groups, the equinoderm semichordates, early chordates, cephalochordata, urochordata, chordates. We look into the first 2-3 groups, and we just need to look into birds and mammals, which is coming in the next few lectures. Okay? This is the new material, so you are going to be tested on that because you have not been tested on it. So you should expect some emphasis in these groups. Still, we are going to eliminate those because they're a smaller group, they're not quite relevant. Hemichordates, lophophoridates, and neararthropoda, you don't need to prepare on that. Those lines scratching those topics are going to be also in bold. So you don't need to write down what you're not going to get in the exam, okay? Still, I bet that there's a couple of people writing down what it's not going to be. Emphasis is going to be on innovations and unique characteristics. What makes reptiles different from amphibians? What makes birds different from reptiles? What is unique about this particular class or this particular phylum? That kind of thing is the emphasis of these questions. A couple of people send me emails asking for some advice to prepare the final exam. I always say to students, make a table, list the phyla, and put unique characteristics, and list them there. When you see them all together, usually that really helps, rather than see one at a time, the entire thing, the entire metabolism for one particular phylum. Try to do those tables comparing things. That usually helps quite a bit. Any questions about this so far? No questions? No complaints? Okay, this is the early material. This is what you saw at the beginning of this course. Looks like a long time ago, but actually it was just 2 months ago. We talk about animal concepts, scientific method, unicellular, symmetry, celomates, species concept, Darwin theories, etc., etc. All that stuff you were already tested at least once, either in the quiz or in the midterm, so that is going to go away for the final exam. Okay, that reduces substantially the amount of stuff that you need to look after, right? Again, the emphasis will be on understanding concepts, homology, analogy. Make sure you understand the difference between them, and things like that, okay? And unique characteristics, that unique structure, that unique cell, what makes this phylum completely different from the previous one, that kind of thing is going to be in the final exam. And this is the subsequent material, the one that comes after the quiz and up to the midterm, and you recognize some groups there, Cnidarians, all the way to all the type of worms, mollusks, and arthropods. And again, some of that material goes away. Ctenophores, roundworms, segmented worms, trilobites, and Virialida in case of the coral. Those are not going to be in the final exam. All right? Is that clear? Any questions so far about contents? Emphasis on understanding concepts, innovations, and unique characteristics.
Yes.
One thing that people ask me afterwards, probably because then they realize they should ask about it. For example, in the case of the mollusks, I asked you to study 3 classes, right? For the midterm, only 3 classes, which were bivalves, cephalopoda, and gastropods, the snail. The same applies to the final exam. Okay? So I'm not going to now ask you about monoplacophora or something like that. The same thing that applied for the quiz and the midterm will apply to the final exam. Okay? I bet I'm going to get that question a couple of times. Oh, there you go, I had it written there. For file included in the final exam, we will focus on the classes or groups that were considered for the midterm, for example. So, in the case of the mollusks, if I told you just need to prepare on these 3 classes, that is what is going to be, again, ruling the final exam. Okay, you are going to like the slide number 6. The final exam does not include lab contents, as usual. does not include any larval names. Yeah, I see they are really eating some of you. Last year I didn't got enough flowers, but not this year. And no book contents, obviously. Okay? So you don't need to remember larval names, that's the point. And for book contents, don't take it as you're going to post your book and sell it today. You can still use your book to prepare your final exam, but I'm not going to read a question from the book that has not been in the lectures. In terms of names and spelling, common names are fine as long as they are common names. If there is only one scientific name with no common name, we have to go with the scientific name. The spelling is okay as long as I recognize the word. But if the word is different enough that may be confused with a different concept or different name, then you will be obviously in trouble. But the main thing, and this is not in the slide, more than the spelling, try to write clear. It's really hard to write some exams, so make sure that you make an effort to write it as clear as possible. Short answer questions, multiple choice questions, and long answer questions. The exam is going to have short answer questions and it's going to have long answer questions. The question is, do you want multiple choice questions or not? Okay. Raise your hand if you want multiple choice questions. Okay. Now raise your hand if you don't want multiple choice questions. Oh, your heads. Okay, what if I keep just a few of them? Okay, I will keep it just as a few. Be 5, okay? This is a 35% exam. So it will be 5 questions reasonable? For those who do not like multiple choice? Okay. I will go over the different type of questions in the next slide.
And we did a lot of work for the...
This is what is going to happen in the next couple of lectures. And you better pay attention because you are going to be asking about this if you don't look at this. On Tuesday, you are going to have mammals, not birds. We're going to see birds afterwards, okay? So you're going to see mammals as the next lecture. And Marina Silva is our mammalogist. She's the expert on that in our department. And she usually does this lecture for me because you better get a lecture on mammals from an expert on mammals. So, make sure you are there because she provides very good information. Plus, she gives some hints about courses and opportunities for people interested in work on mammals. Okay, on Thursday the 20th, you're not going to have a lecture because you are going to be facing the lab exam and probably you will not want to come to the lecture. You're going to be focused studying that thing or something like that. So, frustrated as it is, you're not going to have a lecture this coming Thursday. And then on Tuesday, we're going to have our final lecture, which is birds. We're not done yet, we're just in number 7. On Tuesday, next Tuesday, we're going to have the final lecture and then an overview with examples for the final exam. And obviously you may have some questions and by then you will be thinking about the final exam, not the final exam. So, it will be a good time to do it. Okay. So it's okay if I put 5 here? Is that reasonable for the people who do not like multiple choice questions? So that will be like this. Is that okay? I don't see anybody saying no, please no. So, okay. So that is the way it's going to look. So that could be 27 plus. I think the calculation is fine. Okay. You must be wondering about these questions, the long answer questions. Okay. Usually something that the student like. I can do this again this year if you want it. I put 6 long answer questions and you get to choose 4 of them. The ones that you feel more comfortable responding. Is that okay?
Yes.
Everyone's agreed? Yeah. Okay. Short answer questions will be like the ones that you already know. Should put this in there. Complete blank spaces, responding 1-2 lines, so basically to the point. You will have plenty of space, you will have more space to respond if you need it. You can also write in the back, but it's intended for short answer questions and answers. Multiple choice questions are again 4 stages that you are have to identify which is the wrong one, which is the false one. Again, there will be clearly only one. There will be no possibility of 2 potential false statements. In the long answer questions, you are going to get a well-known diagram, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that in the next slide. And you will be asked to label 1 or 2 structures that you should know. If you don't know them, it's because you haven't been in class. Okay? And respond a question about it. There will be 6 questions, and you are going to get to choose 4. The 4 that you are more confident with. If you respond to 6, I mark the first 4. These are the plots that I'm talking about. This should be fairly familiar to you. These are the plots that we show many times, and it should be very, very familiar for you. You should recognize these in the cnidarians. You should recognize these as a pseudocelomate or a celomate. This for the sea star, and then this for the snail. So I will ask you, okay, something about the mantle cavity here, and you should know, and you should recognize that. So that's the kind of thing what I mean by the plot that I'm going to put in mind. Make sense? Okay, we're going to get back to this with examples in the last lecture of the semester that is going to happen. Not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday. And this Tuesday, that's 10 of 10, you have a lecture on mammals with Marina here. Okay? So we're done.